while in high school and college. It's not the smartest thing to do, but we were way, way far away from them just to see them develop. And I got to say, this is worse. I mean, just the idea of we saw it earlier in the week where it was supposed to go to Carolina, then up the East Coast, then up the middle of Florida. When you wake up this morning and you just see the eye headed straight for you, it's pretty agonizing just to be able to see that. And then when it finally comes, it sits on you for so much longer than a tornado and affects you. We've been without power this morning since 9, and we still don't have it right now, and that's going to be probably, the worst aftermath. So I got to say, I was not able to click my heels together 3 times and say there's no place like home with this one.
Not with the hurricane. Listen, I know that you're with the minor league team, the Fort Myers Miracle. How are you hoping to help your community tomorrow morning?
It's interesting because Harvey just hit Houston, and minor league baseball put together an effort for Harvey relief and to help out the Corpus Christi Hooks Club. And the moment that Irma looked like it possibly could be heading this way, we were in contact with a company called Brandios to try to brainstorm and think of ideas. And I called minor league baseball and I said, if there's any type of Florida relief, I want to be one of the first ones out there with the Fort Myers Miracle, helping lead the charge. You never hope for this. We just raised over $3,000. Our ownership just matched it for the Harvey relief. We raised over $6,000 for Harvey, and we collected water and toilet paper and canned goods because we got flooding from Harvey. We got over 17 inches of rain during that here in Southwest Florida, so our ground was already drenched, and we did some local support. So as a minor league baseball team, you're the front porch of the community, and we've had people coming together naturally for 25 years. This is our 25th season celebration this year. So as the front porch of the community, we're going to lead the community in relief effort any way we can. And, we won't know the damage of Sanibel, Captiva, Fort Myers Beach with all those surges or any of the wind up in Lehigh and LaBelle that got the eye until tomorrow and the days coming. So if Fort Myers is going to need more than a miracle, that's why we're here to help, and that's what minor league baseball is so great.
Good for you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ben Hammond. We appreciate it. Good luck to you, okay?
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate anything you can do.
Absolutely. When we come back, Hurricane Irma still slamming Florida tonight, leaving a trail of destruction across that state. These live pictures coming at you from Tampa, Florida tonight. You can see they're getting wind. Not that much rain at the moment, but it comes and it goes. Hurricane Irma just really barreling through Florida. People who live in the Keys are beginning to assess the damage there. On the phone with me now is Randy Tao, a resident of the Keys and a business owner. He and his family rode out the storm. Randy, when I spoke to you on Friday, you know I was worried about you. We were concerned. So take us through. Tell us what happened. You hunkered down, didn't evacuate.
Well, Don, you know, our plan was to just ride it out, and we knew we were in a very secure, strong house, and we were on high ground, and it did come through the upper Keys. We did not get the eye like they did down in the lower Keys, Key West area, but we did get some pretty substantial winds for quite a while. A lot of damage up here with trees. I did not see any structural damage with homes. There was some flooding. There were some boats that sank. And all in all, the Keys fared pretty well up here. We did have a tide surge like they were talking about, but it wasn't as severe as it could have been.
Were you scared there for a moment? At moments?
Well, there was certainly concern as it was approaching. You know, it's coming this way. It's going left. It's going right. It's you know, we just kept watching the weather minute by minute, and it kept going to the west when it was down near Cuba. Plus, it got hit by those mountains in Cuba, and it got knocked down a little bit. So we were pretty we were ready for whatever was going to happen. And as it turned out, we did not take the brunt of it, and we were all pretty much in a safe haven.
Did you lose power?
We did lose power this morning about 2 o'clock, and we're still without power, although there's a neighbor of mine right down the street that has power, never lost it.
Wow, interesting. So, listen, you say that you witnessed destruction from Hurricane Andrew, that it left behind, and you learned a lot from that experience. How does Irma compare to that?
Well, this is a landscape event for us up here. A lot of trees. Wilma was devastation with houses missing and roofs gone and just a lot of destruction. We did not get that up here. Now, lower Keys, they did get quite a bit of damage. You know, it's a lot more severe down there because they took the brunt of it, the eye of the storm. I know they had about a 10-foot, 12-foot tide surge down there, so they had a lot of problems. But from what I hear, it's not as bad as it could have been.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask you: are you regretting your decision not to evacuate, or you're okay with it?
No, not at all. I mean, as it turned out, you know, the family was safe. We were secure. We weren't at a place where we didn't know anybody, or we had to, you know, try to fend for ourselves. And that storm is still going. And it's hard to run from a storm when it's going to move to the north. And we live in Florida. There's only so far you can go left or right. So you're going to deal with it sooner or later. And as it turned out, we made the right decision staying home. We were all you know, very comfortable, and we didn't have any problems. And I'm glad it all worked out the way it did.
Randy, I got to tell you, everyone here, we were all worried. We were like, we're talking to him on Sunday night when we come back on the air with this particular program, and we're glad that we are. We're glad that you're safe. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Florida won't know the extent of the damage from Hurricane Irma at least until dawn, but there's no question there will be a lot of rebuilding to do all across the state. Joining me now is Nigel Holderby, American Red Cross spokesperson, and she joins me via Skype. Nigel, thank you for joining us. What type of resources does the Red Cross have in place in Florida right now?
Well, this is really a massive relief effort, and I'm actually sitting here in the Orlando headquarters office where we're really kind of hunkering down, and I can hear the winds roaring outside, and we're in the ballroom area here, so feel really secure about that, and knowing that we have thousands of volunteers that are literally working out with our evacuation centers, you know, providing that support to the communities. That's happening now. We have the truckloads of relief supplies that are headed this way, that are responding, trailers with shelter supplies. One of the things that we know is right now people are in evacuation mode, and those evacuation centers are really there to just make sure that people's lives are saved, from this weather. So when we look at what comes next, and we're in the response phase right now, when we look at recovery, that looks a little bit different. And there may be the opportunity where we would need to stand up a full-blown shelter where we'd have cots for everyone to sleep and food, and that shelter would be a little bit more long-term. So we're prepared to do that. We have those resources staged in the area so that they can get where they need to go pretty quickly.
So what does a Red Cross need, and how can people help?
Well, we have, like I said, thousands of volunteers. We have all of these opportunities for people that are helping. The other way that people can help is to make a donation. We cannot do what we do without the power of those volunteers and the generosity of the donors. And if you'd like to help, we have the responses that are happening. Harvey, still ongoing. We're still there. We're working with Irma right now, watching what will happen as it goes up into Georgia and up into the south area or the northern area of us. So people can make a donation. That donation goes to help get those volunteers where they need to be and to provide for people in recovery. You can text the word Irma to 90999, and that'll make a $10 donation. All those donations add up with the generosity to make this possible.
Text Irma to 90999, and what is the donation with that?
That $10 donation,
$10.
that donation is going to support the relief operation and then that recovery phase as well.
All right, text 90999, text Irma to that number, and that'll give a $10 donation. The Red Cross does amazing work. So obviously, Nigel, Irma is still very much an active situation, but let's talk about response to a storm of this nature. When the storm clears out, what are the first tasks the Red Cross gets to?
Really, we look at the people that are in the shelter and in the evacuation centers. Are they able to go home? And then we're waiting for those words from the county, from the government, to be able to say that the all clear is there, that people can return to their home, and then start assessing the damage. And then the Red Cross comes in and we start looking at that damage as well. We're looking at people who may not be able to go back into their homes, people who have lost or have complete destruction, or then you have people who have just minor damage. And so we look at those and we make those assessments, and then we'll be able to provide the relief for that recovery. Sometimes that means a cleanup kit. Sometimes that means providing some bleach to kind of clean things up and get things, that are, pretty minimal. Other times that means that we're providing a little bit more in different areas, but it is definitely individual assistance and working with those families, provide some casework to really talk to them and see what exactly those needs are. And then we're working with them individually and then as a community to put them back together and get them back on their feet.
Nigel Holderby from the American Red Cross. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you as well. Listen, I just want to read something that a viewer sent, and just to give you an idea, because I don't want people to think that anyone is taking this lightly, but they said, "Hey, Don, the damage to middle and lower keys is substantial," on all capital letters. I'm sure there's a nice guy, but don't let the guy in Alamorado lead you to believe that it wasn't a big deal. His area didn't get hit as badly. There's a major humanitarian crisis happening in the Keys. There is no cell service, no power, no internet. Roads are impassable, and the area is down. The area impassable and the area is down. Marathon, where my house is, suffered huge damage. Non-residents aren't allowed into Monroe County. The National Guard is deployed. So this is still a big deal. A lot of people suffered major damage in the Keys. Mr. Tao's area didn't get as much damage as he thought, but there's still a humanitarian crisis in the Keys and far beyond that, obviously in the Caribbean and also in other parts of Florida. And for ways that you can help those affected by Hurricane Irma, go to cnn.com/impact. We'll be right back. Here's our breaking news right now. Hurricane Irma absolutely slamming Florida as it moves north, spreading destruction from coast to coast. The center of the storm about 50 miles southeast of Tampa. Ryan Young is not far away in Clearwater, and Bryn Gingras is in Orlando for us. Bryn, I want to start with you. There's also a curfew in place where you are. What are you seeing?
Oh yeah, we have a curfew until 6 o'clock tomorrow, Don. Now listen, I played basketball my entire life. I'm pretty comfortable with the defensive stance, but when we get these wind gusts coming down this alley here in downtown Orlando, I'd much rather take a charge. I can tell you that much. We are just seeing these heavy wind gusts that just sort of, like I said, coming right through alleyways, really, of downtown Orlando, because we have so many tall buildings in the downtown area. And my producer, Lynn Tran, who can't see it because of our cameras taking shelter, but to my right are two enormous cranes, and they have rotated a full 180 degrees, and now they are about lopsided this way with this wind. And I gotta say, this is the outer bands of the storm. I know that my colleagues at CNN were getting much stronger wind gusts to the south earlier today, so I have some serious sympathy for them, because I can tell you right now, we're getting a really tough one right now, Don. And again, this is Orlando, in the middle of the state. We're not by a coast, and we're still seeing these effects.
All right, Bryn. Bryn, I want you to stand by. And Bryn, I need you to keep safe down there. We're going to get back to you because, boy, it looks like it's really happening where she is. I also want to get to Clearwater. We'll check in with Bryn in a moment, back in with her. But Clearwater, that's where Ryan Young is. The storm's path, obviously, it changed a bit, but you've been getting pummeled all night in Clearwater. What is going on?
Yeah, we have. Look, we've been live since 5 o'clock this afternoon, and now we're stretching into the evening here. And the power of the wind just seems to keep ramping up. Every time I think it's about to die down, we see a little more in terms of the wind. I just want to point something out over here. We've noticed in this direction over here, we've noticed some more transformers that have been blowing in that area. And in fact, you might be able to see some of the lights that are flickering in that direction. A couple more loud booms. That's something that we've seen throughout the night. So I think we've counted at least 7 transformers in the area that have blown and some sparks in the area. Now, we talked about that emergency vehicle that passed by. Still no word about exactly what that has been. But the real conversation is just how powerful the wind and how consistent it is. And Don, I'm going to ask Larry to take one step back. Something that we want to show you is sometimes it's just all about where you're standing. Because when you stand here, and this is kind of where our anchor point was, the whole conversation changes because the wind dies down. We have this big piece of concrete that's between us and the wind, and it gets you to settle down just a little bit. And when you talk about the idea of so many people going through this for hours and hours, they're stuck in their homes. Maybe they've lost their power. We're in a commercial area, so maybe the power is on here, but there are some people who are just listening to their radios. Folks have actually called into the place that we are to say, hey, they are watching because they wanted to see where their storm was going, and they're sort of breathing a sigh of relief. But it's not over just yet, because when you step back out this way, you know the power of the storm is still out there. And what you don't want to happen is someone to step outside where there's a power line or an object that just blows by, because we've seen pieces of roof flying by in our direction. And luckily, we haven't been hit all night, but there's a crew of people who help us stay on. This has been going pretty smoothly. So far, so good. No major power outages to report. But of course, we'll have to reassess in the morning to see the kind of punch this storm left behind. And
you took the words right out of my mouth. I'm wondering, though, if it's just because you're in a commercial area or if you may be on backup generator in that area. But we'll figure it out, Ryan. We need to get to Sarah Seidner. She's in Daytona Beach. Sarah, east coast of Florida, what are you dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, where Ryan is, we're about 225 miles from where he is, and we are still getting these incredibly strong gusts. It's actually gusting stronger than a lot of folks thought it would here. It's gotten up to 70 miles per hour in those gusts. That is just under a Category 1 storm. I'm going to get out of the way of the camera, but I want to mention some things to you that are really important. You see how the trees are whipping around there, and you see how every now and then things look like they're spinning a bit? Well, we're hearing now from Brevard County, which is about an hour drive south from here, an hour or so, 60 miles or so. That's where Cape Canaveral is, NASA. You should be familiar with that. We all love the NASA space program. So in that area, we just talked to an emergency management person who was there at the EOC who has been unable to sleep because he is up working and he's getting time and time again, 40 times he's been warned that tornadoes are coming. We now know that 2 have been confirmed touched down in Brevard County. There are no injuries at this time, no deaths at this time in Brevard County, but that gives you some idea that within this storm, as you're seeing these winds whip around and as you're feeling these gusts, which are here where we are on Daytona Beach, they're at tropical storm force winds, and at the higher end of tropical storm force winds, at those gusts actually. But what's happening in Brevard is that some of that is turning into tornadic activity. So 2 confirmed tornadoes touching down in Brevard County, and we're also getting tons of warnings there in Brevard. Sorry, fixing our light here. The wind's really whipping about, and the things that you have to be careful about, not only these gusts, which can blow you over and can blow projectiles at you, but also tornadoes. And there have been a lot of warnings, some that have touched down, some that have just been warnings, but there is a sense in some of the counties around here, and we're in Volusia County, that there will be some tornado damage after this storm goes by. By the way, it is supposed to, according to our CNN meteorology department, it is supposed to get the strongest and most dangerous at 4 a.m. local time here, so Eastern Standard Time. That's in 3 hours. And then this storm is supposed to move on. And we've just heard from some of the linemen who are here, who are contracted to go out and try to take care of some of that power that has gone out. An unprecedented number of people without power in this storm. Well, they say they are going to get on the road, if they can, at 6 a.m. And if they can't, they'll start at 8. But they are planning to get out there first thing in the morning as soon as these winds die down. And a lot of them we know are headed to Miami.
Sarah Seidner, stay safe. Great reporting out there. We appreciate it. When we come back, Irma pounding Florida with violent winds and torrential rains as it moves north. But in the midst of the destruction, we've got some stories of good news. You're going to hear one of them. That's coming up. devastation from this storm, there are some stories of good news. And joining me now via Skype, heroes of the storm, Officer Nick Lentz and Major Richard Rand of the North Miami Police Department. It's good to get some good news on, and we thank you both gentlemen for joining us. So, Officer, I want to talk to you first. There are so many people in desperate need tonight. You helped a woman and her baby today. Tell us what happened.
Approximately, the call came out about 4:30 that a structure or a house was compromised and there was water coming in, and there was a female and her child inside. I believe her neighbor actually called for her. We got the call from dispatch, and the only way we could respond was with our MRAP, which is our larger vehicle, because the water was about 3 feet high. We made entry into the neighborhood and were able to locate the house. We gained entry through her doorway and gave her a few minutes to pack some things for the baby, and then we were able to extract the baby out of the house safely into the MRAP and the mother as well, and take her to North Miami Beach High School.
Oh, that's great. So tell us about the family you rescued. How are they doing tonight?
I'm sure they're doing great. I haven't actually really seen her. We've been still taking calls since 4:30 this afternoon, but we left her in good hands.
Yeah. So, Major, what is the need like there? Are police and emergency officials getting lots of calls?
First, let me just touch base a little bit on what Officer Lentz said. This is just one example of what our fine men and women are doing in uniform. Officer Lentz is an extremely proud officer, along with his team, and it took a lot of guts for these guys to do what they're doing and continue doing. And so let me tell you what's going on here in North Miami Beach. We are putting boots on the ground. As soon as the storm passed us, we got teams of officers to go out there, go street to street, business to business, alleyway to alleyway, making sure that our residents are safe, reporting all the live wires down, putting out fires, helping people through these very difficult times down here.
Yeah. So listen, and listen, that's what police officers around the country do every day, but especially now so, considering the destruction that's happening. And officer, I've got to ask you, since, you know, in all this destruction, for all the destruction from this terrible storm, there are always inspiring moments, and this is certainly one of them. I got to ask you how you feel tonight about making, you know, such a big difference.
I mean, I'm a father as well, so I got 2 young daughters at home right now. So it definitely made me proud to be an officer today. I was happy I was there. I know anyone on the team, you know, everyone on the team was right there next to me, doing it with me.
Yeah. Well, Officer Nick Lentz and Major Richard Rand, thank you so much. North Miami Police Department, you guys are fantastic. We appreciate you joining us here on CNN.
Sure, it's North Miami Beach Police Department.
Thank you so much. That's okay. Thank you.
Sure,
we appreciate
thank you.
it. The storm that's battering Florida right now has cut a path of destruction across the state beginning in the early hours on Sunday. Let's recap what happened. At 7, Hurricane Irma first makes landfall in the Keys with devastating force, flooding the streets, and we don't know yet the full extent of the damage. But there are reports tonight that it could be very severe. And then at 7:40, CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam is battered by violent hurricane force winds in Miami Beach. And you can see, as the camera turns around, look at that street sign. Watch it, it's unbelievable. There you go. Also in Miami Beach, CNN's Kyung Law fights to stay upright. Watch what happens as the street signs comes down. A street sign comes down, and imagine if it hits someone. It's incredibly dangerous.
But it becomes increasingly more difficult. It lifts up, and it comes at your head. And if you're not wearing something protective, for example, like that, you want to just make sure you're...
And all over Florida, marinas were flooded, boats rocking and coming loose. And I want you to look at this shot. It's of downed trees. It's going to take a long time to clean up after this storm. But right now, nobody knows what the landscape is going to look like in the light of day. I want to take a look now at John Berman. He was in Miami, and you can see how strong these winds really are and what kind of damage they can do. And by 3 p.m., the storm makes landfall again in Marco Island. And you can see the damage Irma is doing to trees all over the southern half of that state. And by 4, our Chris Cuomo taking winds of 130 miles an hour. It's not easy to stand in that kind of wind and rain. And then at 6 p.m., you can see Miguel Marquez standing in Punta Gorda. All the seawater was sucked out of there, and you can see boats on the bay floor mired in the mud. Miguel reports just a short time ago the water has now returned. And just in the last few hours, our Ryan Young in Clearwater grabbing hold of a chain wrapped around a concrete column to keep steady. Irma delivering a powerful, powerful blow all across the state of Florida, and it is still going on. So make sure you stay with CNN for live coverage throughout the night and when the new day breaks for continuing coverage. It has been amazing to see. We've witnessed, we've spoken to people, officers, several officers and members of the military who delivered a baby. We just spoke with 2 police officers who helped a mother and her 4-month-old as well. This is live pictures now from Tampa, Florida. We are seeing winds are still whipping. The rain is coming down. We have seen some stop signs or stop lights that are barely dangling just by a rope. And there's concern about power outages, more power outages, with 3 million people now without power. And the worst is yet to come for some parts of Florida. And a live picture as we leave you now from Orlando, Florida. Our live coverage is going to continue now with Michael Holmes in Tampa and Isa Suarez in Miami. I'm Don Lemon. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Hello and welcome to our viewers all around the world. I'm Michael Holmes here in Tampa, Florida, as we continue our coverage of the progress of Hurricane Irma.
And I'm Isa Suarez coming to you live from Miami, where it's just turned 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much for being with us.
And yes, we continue our coverage from here in Tampa. The storm, it's still a powerful hurricane. It is still a hurricane. It has weakened, and that has been good news for the people of Tampa. If the eye of this storm had gone to the west of the city, there were great fears about storm surge causing havoc here. This is a city that is vulnerable to storm surge. It has low-lying areas, a lot of development along the water. Even some of the causeways, the bridges are fairly low. There was a lot of concern. We spoke to the mayor yesterday, and that was his big worry. The eye, of course, and we're going to check in with Karen McGuinness in a minute, has moved to the east, which is a good thing, and we'll check about how that storm surge is going to look now. I can tell you that the water is still going outbound at the moment because of how the winds are going, and the river here has dropped markedly over the last 12 hours. It will come back up. Let's bring in Karen McGuinness and talk a little bit more about where Irma is, where it's heading, how strong it is. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Michael, yes, there are a lot of interesting dynamics, as there has been for days now with Irma. I'm going to stay on this for a little while, but there's just a lot of interesting information that we can glean from this radar imagery. First of all, Irma is located just about over Lakeland. That's between Tampa and Orlando. It's about 25 miles to the south of Lakeland. But what we can see on this radar imagery are some of these really strong bands just about over the central portion of Florida, just to the north of Tampa. What is interesting here is that we're seeing kind of an enhancement of the wind. So we were checking the wind conditions right around Daytona Beach, towards Jacksonville, towards Amelia Island. They are very strong. Now, why would that be? Because we've got dry air intrusion. That means the system is not sitting out over the open water, so it's not tapping the warm, moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, but it is being enhanced by being picked up, carried over the Atlantic, and enhancing some of these storms that are moving through. Still the risk in this upper right quadrant for the potential for tornadoes. That is one of the most dynamic areas. Now, specifically from about Jacksonville all the way towards the Cape, that's where we're looking at wind gusts between about 60 and close to 75 miles an hour. Now, what about Tampa? Tampa is interesting in that the system now lies to the east of Tampa. So the winds are essentially going out, but eventually over the next couple of hours, we're watching as the system continues its trek towards the north, and it is generally speaking moving north fairly rapidly. That is good news. We want it to move pretty swiftly so that none of these conditions just kind of linger like we saw with Harvey over Texas about 16 days ago. But in fact, we'll move onshore, and as they do, we'll start to see that water come in. It's going to be very dramatic. Not as dramatic as some of the initial kind of computer models were suggesting, but let's give you kind of a different overall perspective of what we're looking at right now. There you can kind of see the winds offshore, but as we go through time, it starts to shift more towards onshore. So all these places from Tampa to Clearwater to Tarpon Springs, towards Newport Richey, towards Crystal River, they will all see this storm surge as Irma continues its progression towards the north. So, as you can imagine, the longer it stays over land, it will continue to weaken. But that broad field of rainfall is still going to be in position. This is kind of a forecast radar. We go through Monday morning, and by the way, you can imagine that the Tampa International Airport is not going to be in full operation for tomorrow, nor is Miami, because the Miami International Airport had major water damage. They are closed for Monday, September 11th. They hope to open on maybe a reduced schedule on Tuesday, depending on how much repair they can get done. But looking up towards Atlanta, Georgia, even into Atlanta, the National Weather Service is suggesting 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, maybe some locally heavier amounts. But the wind is going to be pretty tremendous here, too. So this is, I'm glad that we're on this particular image because I can show you some of these enhanced bands that are coming in off the Atlantic, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville. You're not in the thick of it just yet, but I do think as time goes on, we'll start to see these bands just kind of reach more northward. So even into places like Savannah, possibly into Beaufort, South Carolina, you'll start to see pretty heavy rainfall, and the wind is going to pick up. Partly because Irma is moving, but partly because we've got that enhancement of that moisture wrapped around that northern edge, that dynamic north upper right quadrant. Here is Tampa right now. As I mentioned, I'll just kind of reinforce that idea that we do have the offshore winds now, but eventually in the next 2 hours or so, we'll start to see that shift, and there is high tide. Now, we know the tides across this region are not very dramatic. Not like if you were going north, they might be 5 feet or 10 feet. And through here, it's roughly a foot, maybe 1.5 feet. But our storm surge is going to be 1 to 3 feet. So, Michael, this is, as you say, a lot of low-lying areas here. It has really built up over the years. And this is going to be one added troublemaker going into the next couple of hours with that onshore flow.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, it's a city that long has been seen as vulnerable to precisely this sort of storm and this sort of risk of storm surge. And what you say, Karen, makes perfect sense. We've been watching the water here next to us going outwards, as you said, with those winds. When those winds turn around, that water's going to come inwards. That's when storm surge comes into play. The risk is there for flooding, for damage to those homes, very expensive homes, by the way, along the water's edge. Also businesses. There's a hospital back there that is low-lying as well. But hopefully not as high a surge as was initially feared when Irma was coming up west of the city, out over the water. It has been quite extraordinary here watching the winds build up and those gusts come up 50, 60 miles an hour at times, and the rain has been hammering down here. Out in the weather is Stephanie Elam. She is here in Tampa as well. Stephanie, give us a situation of what you've seen over the last few hours, what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, well, right now, Michael, it's sort of picking up a little bit here, as you can probably see. It just blew me off a little bit here as I was standing here to show you just how much the wind and rain is coming through here in these. Off of shore, if you're familiar with Tampa, you can see that that's a road that runs right along the highway, and the water was all the way up, normally high, and then later today, earlier yesterday, you can see that that water had receded and people were out there. So in some ways, it's almost a blessing coming through at night, and that water is going to return at night because people were so fascinated. And it is fascinating, but it's just a reminder to people that that is dangerous, because at some point that water is going to come back. Even if it's not as fast as we thought it might have been before, it can be really, really dangerous, especially with the winds whipping around the way they do. So you saw a lot of people doing that earlier. But for the most part, the streets are clear. People are not out here, which is a good thing. We talked to a few people who were staying in high-rises downtown, and they were just going to ride it out, and they knew they were going to be in for a stronger sway higher up, but they were content to do that. As far as shelters are concerned, 28,000 people in this county, Hillsborough County, which Tampa is in, are in 45 shelters around the area. They said they still had room, but Michael, obviously at this point, if you're not there, don't go out. Like, there's no reason to come out here right now, because while it may look like this is a calmer moment, it changes on a dime so fast. And right away, you can feel you're kind of taken off your balance by the wind and the rain. So it's not worth coming out here. It's much better to stay inside, stay with your loved ones, and you can check on everything else tomorrow. But as far as things are concerned right now, I can tell you that it's starting to feel like it's starting to really pick up here in downtown Tampa with the winds and the rains coming around, and sometimes it kind of takes your breath away. But yeah, so far, but not as much as we thought it was going to be doing earlier in the night, Michael.
Yeah, Steph, I know exactly what you mean. It's just picked up here in the last couple of minutes or so, and it's really howling down the river next to us. Appreciate that, Stephanie Ilham here in Tampa, Florida. We came to Tampa, what was it? It was early yesterday morning to Tampa from Orlando because we thought that Tampa was going to get hit harder than Orlando. But because of the movement of the storm going inland like it is, Orlando is getting hammered. Bryn Gingras is there for us now. I was watching you earlier getting knocked around. How is it now?
Well, it proves that you don't have to be on the coast to really get hammered by the storm. It's just enormous and covering this state and everyone really in its path. And really right now we're in the downtown part of Orlando where there's tall buildings, and that's just creating wind tunnels where sheets of rain are just coming at us with these strong wind gusts. Now, earlier we had a fraction of what we're experiencing, and I can tell you in the distance we saw a bright blue sky light up, which of course means that a transformer blew. We saw a bunch of emergency vehicles because at that time it was safe for them to go about the streets, and we inquired about what they were racing towards. It wasn't that transformer, it was actually someone was in their car and crashed, and when emergency vehicles responded, that person had died. So it was one of Orlando's fatalities, according to the fire chief here, that is storm related. Of course, investigators couldn't really investigate that because of these terrible conditions, but it just goes to show you that it really doesn't take much for this storm to be super dangerous. And even with Orlando being in the center of the state with people on both coasts coming here to evacuate, we're certainly seeing conditions be pretty difficult. I also want to mention here in Orlando at the convention center, they're housing thousands of emergency vehicles ready to respond all across the state, and those vehicles coming across the country. And but it's going to take a while for this storm to die down before they can get to anywhere and see where the damage was from this storm. Back to you.
Yeah, and Bryn, when we were there the last couple of nights, the city was quite lively. People were out and about. They were enjoying the pubs and the clubs and being quite rowdy at times. What sort of response has there been to the curfew? There's a curfew there. There's a curfew here. People are being told to stay in place until this is well over with. You're seeing it pretty quiet there, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was a curfew enacted at 7 o'clock Eastern time in Orlando. Everyone was asked to stay off the streets. Emergency vehicles were the only ones we were seeing. But once the wind gusts hit 65 miles per hour, those emergency vehicles stopped responding to anything. And that's when power outages were starting. And I think people were actually taking warning and just going inside and being in the hotel rooms or the shelters that they came to Orlando for to escape the coasts. But certainly it didn't take much for people to get a little scared. There were some, you know, brave, or I don't know if not very smart people that we saw driving at one point when we saw wind gusts like this, and hopefully they're okay. But other than that, mostly people have heeded the warning.
All right, Bryn, thanks so much. Take care out there. Bryn Gingras there in Orlando, Florida. Back here in Tampa, it's really picking up at the moment. The rain driving through, the wind driving through. People are being told to stay in place. Don't leave your home. Even when this blows through, people are being told to stay where they are so authorities can get out, assess the damage, and they'll let you know when it's okay to start coming out. I did read one disturbing report, which is in one county in Florida, Miami-Dade. There's already been nearly 30 arrests for looting and burglary. So some people taking advantage of the situation here, and people being out of town. Of course, you know, 6.5 million people in Florida were told that they should evacuate. How many actually did, we don't know exactly, but 6.5 million in a state of 20 million is considerable, and obviously some less than honest folks are taking advantage of that. Let's go down to Miami now. Isa Suarez is there for us. She's been there throughout all of this. Isa, fill us in on what you've been seeing.
And Michael, I was just listening to your conversation with Bryn there. It's incredible just to listen to what she's starting to see, what you're starting to see, and what we've been through in the last 24 hours or so. You cannot trust the weather. At any moment, it basically turns, and we have seen that for ourselves. This is Brickell. This is the financial area here in Miami. And this is the very expensive real estate of Miami. This where the banks are, and what is behind me is a street, Michael, that has been turned into a river. It is starting to die down slightly and to recede some of the waters, but as you can see behind me, there is so much water still on this main road. At one point during the day, it was as high as 3 feet of water driving up here from where we were yesterday. Trees have been uprooted. So many people without power, over 3 million people in the state of Florida without power. We ourselves have been without power throughout most of the day in our hotel, and it's made life impossible for so many people. But at the same time, Michael, I keep getting asked, is it safe to go outside? No, it is not, and that is what we keep hearing from authorities. You have to wait for the green light to come out. Why? One, because there is still so much water outside. Two, as you can see, the wind, there's still a strong gust behind me. And with that comes debris, not just from trees, but from buildings. We'll see from our correspondents throughout the day, this, as they've been reporting, pieces of buildings, debris from buildings have been falling, as well as scaffolding from some of the buildings. Now, we'll have much more on the damages here on Miami Beach right after a very short break. Do stay right here with CNN.
Anyone can Geico. Lazy Human Edition.
Here, kitty, here, kitty. Good kitty. Left, tap it. Get us some insurance. Yeah. Okay. Kitty, kitty, your treat. Good kitty.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. I'm Isa Suarez, and you are joining me in Miami. I'm actually in Brickell. This is the financial quarter here of Miami. And at one point during the day, when really when Irma was plowing through here, the water was as high as pretty much 3 feet. It was up to your waist. As you can see, it's receded somewhat. And many people here thankful the damages haven't been as bad as some were expected. Of course, the officials still need to assess some of the damage. Let me show you some video, though, of some of the worst damages we have seen throughout the day here in Miami. Take a look at this. Streets practically covered in floodwaters, which is very much what we're seeing here. Miami was battered with powerful winds as well as heavy rains. And this is some of the first look at some of the damage. Take a look at this dramatic video we're about to show you. This is the moment a roof was ripped off. Yes, ripped off a 2-story apartment building downtown. And then this construction crane really couldn't withstand the strong winds. It collapsed onto the high-rise building beneath it. And the cranes were a huge problem here in Miami. There's something about 20 cranes that was still standing, and they couldn't take down because it would have taken about 7 days to actually take down. So they were tightened, but of course some of them could not withstand some of those strong winds. Let's get more now. Our Derek Van Dam was with me throughout the day yesterday, and he was being battered from all sides by the rain and the winds, and he joins me from Miami Beach. Derek, give me a sense, and our viewers a sense of the damage in Miami Beach.
Yeah, we're on Pine Tree Drive in Miami Beach, Isa, and we definitely felt the hurricane force winds within this area, Category 1, but we definitely only got a glancing blow from Hurricane Irma's extreme power. We know that the Keys were hit exceptionally hard. We know Marco Island, for instance, and as it continues to race northward across the peninsula. But still some damage here to talk about. A lot of down trees, a lot of down power lines. Stuff you would expect with a Category 1 hurricane or impacts from a Category 1. Now, there are over 850,000 customers that are without power just in Miami-Dade County alone. That's 79% of the people who live within this particular area that have electrical powers, electricity from that region. And it's incredible because the reason why we don't have power here is because of trees like this that continue to fall on power lines, taking down the electricity. But it's not only the concerns for the police officers and the fire officials that are out scouring the streets at the moment. They also are worried about looting, and that's a concern as well. There's a heavy police presence roaming the streets of Miami Beach right now because without electricity, there simply aren't any alarms to keep a building safe, especially with the mandatory evacuations. There are no security personnel on site and no people, quite frankly. Also, another concern that we were talking to some city officials about, there's the potential for gas leaks here. There have been significant gas leaks in a few different locations, and unfortunately, they can't turn the electricity back on in Miami Beach until these gas leaks are actually fixed and capped. So that could be days before they do that because they're going to have to deal with this. And a lot of the utility companies can't smell or hear the gas leaks because the wind is still so strong, gusting at 45 miles per hour. Now, I had the opportunity to interview the mayor of Miami Beach a little bit earlier this evening, and this is what he had to say about Irma's glancing blow to the city.
I think Miami Beach did relatively well. I mean, those were some very strong winds. Thank God our pumps held, our raised roads did very well, and we had very minimal flooding, especially in the areas that we approved for our sea level project. There's power lines down, you'll see branches and trees and all different roads all across the city. We've maintained our curfew. No one's allowed to be out past 8 o'clock at night. And of course, no one can come back to Miami Beach for at least a day or so. We haven't decided yet. Tomorrow morning, we have crews coming in at 6 a.m., major emergency recovery crews. We're going to start clearing out all our roads to make sure that we can get back on our feet as fast as possible.
Isa, this is a very wealthy neighborhood that I'm standing in right now. In fact, the house where this tree fell over on the fence and the front portion of this person's yard is about $2 million. But, you know, maybe a glancing blow for these individuals, a couple of days of cleanup before they get themselves back on their feet. we have to really think about the people who are a little less fortunate than this with the complete widespread destruction that they've seen, again, across the Florida Keys and into parts of the western peninsula of Florida. Isa?
Absolutely, and I heard your interview there with the mayor of Miami Beach, Derek, and Miami-Dade, we know that officials will be coming out in the streets at 5 o'clock in the morning to really assess the damage and also start picking up some of those trees, these downed trees. Thanks very much, Derek Van Dam. Miami Beach, we touch base with you a bit later. And Michael, so really what we're starting to see is here in Miami is the water starting to recede, and the damage was trying to assess the damage. And thankfully, Michael, it isn't as bad as many were anticipating. Nevertheless, many still without power, thousands of people without power here in Miami, and that means that you just have to wait a bit longer before you can return to your homes, before you can get that green light. That's still crucial because the winds are still strong, and of course with water still here in the main motorway, it becomes very, very dangerous indeed. Michael?
It certainly does, Issa. Thanks for that, and we'll get back to you in a moment. It's interesting, Issa, they're talking about people without power. That number is now approaching 4 million are without power in this state. An extraordinary number. It's going to be days. There's a lot of utility crews have headed down from other states, from as far away as the Carolinas, to help out down here. But it could be, and there's been warnings from officials, it could be weeks for some people before they get the power back on. Hopefully days, but it could be weeks. The rain has really been picking up here in the last little while. It's just abated in the last few seconds, but it was just coming straight at us, horizontal, the wind picking up. Not far from here, Clearwater, Florida. That's where our Ryan Young has been reporting from, and I wanted to play you some video that he recorded earlier. Let's listen to that.
We're just south of the airport, and just depending on where I stand, you can see how the wind is just crossing from left to right or circling around us, and that has been the consistency here. We have seen some parts of roof tiles flying by us, and we've seen some billboards at this point succumb to the wind. And as I lean forward, you can hear just how powerful the wind gusts are. We've experienced at least 80-mile-per-hour winds at some point, but now we're getting another strong gust. It seems like no matter what we do, it gets a little tougher. You gotta spread your feet, though. It's all good. For the most part, though, we've been tremendously safe, and most people have gotten off the roads. In fact, we haven't seen a car on the roadways for about an hour and a half now, so it seems like people realize the worst of the storm may be coming this direction at this point, and they're beating it by staying inside. The last two things I'll mention is people in this area were worried about flooding because it does flood even in the best of times when it's just a strong rainfall, and that is something that people are concerned about in this late hours, the idea that there could be some serious ponding in the morning.
Yeah, Ryan Young there in Clearwater, Florida, not too far from us here in Tampa, which is being hammered at the moment by Hurricane Irma as it makes its way north, fortunately over land, which is causing it to weaken, but it's still pretty severe, I can tell you. There are trees bending, the rain is driving, and the wind is howling. We're going to take a short break. We will be right back, though, with more coverage of Hurricane Irma. Stay with us.
Where's Gary?
Saved money on motorcycle insurance with Geico. Going up the country.
Geico Motorcycle. Great rates for great rides.